Hello and welcome back to Future You, the podcast brought to you by graduate careers experts Prospects. I'm your host, Emily Slade, and in this episode I speak to Katie about what it's like working in His Majesty's Prison and Probation Service.
So my name is Katie Lawley. I work within HMPPS, which is His Majesty's Prison and Probation Service. My current job title is the National Prison Drug and Alcohol Lead. I work within prison headquarters, leading on drug recovery across prisons.
Amazing. So, what does your educational journey look like, and what drew you to this industry in the first place?
Yeah, I was thinking about my educational journey earlier and really never really had a clear plan growing up. In terms of what I really wanted to do. I think that my dad always had this ambition that I would go to university. And for me, my ambition was always to be an actress. That was something that I wanted to pursue. But after some negotiations, or shall we say, with my dad, the decision was really that actually I should go to university and just see how it goes. And if I'm still interested in acting afterwards, then that's something that I could pursue from that point. So I went to college and I did psychology and law. And whilst I was there, I really enjoyed those parts of it. And so the degree that I wanted to do was psychology and criminology. That was the bit that I was excited about. I enjoyed that part the most. So I went to the University of Suffolk and did joint psychology and criminology degree, which was really, really interesting. And I think that when we did one of the modules on prisons, I just was really fascinated in it. And it was only such a short module. I think it was just one session and wrote an essay about prisons. And I really wanted to find out more and know more. So that was really a bit of my education and why I then sort of thought about prisons. But I haven't got any family or friends who worked in the prison service, so I wasn't sure how I would get into working in prisons. So that was something that I was working through, I guess, when I was at university, and during one of the volunteering events at the university, there was a stall which was Catch 22, and I remember it at the time. And they were taking volunteers, and Catch 22 is a charity that work with young people, and at the time they were working with people who had maybe just come out of prison, young people who had just come out of prison, or trying to prevent people from going into prison. So it was a bit of a mentoring role. So I thought it'd be a good opportunity to use that time to try and get some experience so that if I did get a job or an interview within the prison service or something similar, then I had some experience to talk about, I guess. And that was really good. I loved working for Catch 22, and I actually got a paid job with them once I finished university, only for a short term. But I used to oversee all of the mentors within Ipswich. So yeah, that was a bit of my educational journey. And I've also been lucky enough to do a funded master's through the Ministry of Justice as well. So I've got a master's degree in leadership, and I did that at Henley Business School.
Oh, incredible. That's a fascinating career journey. Just following that, do you find that your foundation within drama and acting has helped you at all?
I think that it does quite often help in situations when, I might be getting up on stage, or, now I do quite a lot of public speaking within my role. And so I do think that I almost kind of psych myself up before I go on and, yeah, use some of those skills, I guess. But it was more around the confidence, I would say, is what I've kind of taken from that. When you're having to get up on stage and do acting, you're around people you don't really know. You have to trust people that they're going to say the right lines. And, there's lots of learning. You've got to learn lots of lines. So I guess, yeah, if in hindsight, it probably did support my prep for this journey, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. So, you joined the leadership scheme as a new graduate. Can you tell us a bit about what that was like and what your experience was like?
Yeah, so when I finished working with Catch 22, I actually applied for a job within the prison service, working as an administration officer within HMP Hoseley Bay. That was my first job that I worked as. So I didn't apply for the graduate scheme at that point to get into the prison service. There wasn't anything like that at the time that I was aware of, like the Future Prison Leaders program now that's being advertised. There wasn't the opportunity to apply for something like that, or it wasn't advertised around my university. So I remember like speaking to lots of people when they would say, what are you going to do when you finish uni? I think that's one of the biggest questions that people asked you. And I was like, oh, I just want to work in prisons. Like, that's what I want to do. But I don't know how I'm going to get there. I remember that last part really, really clearly. I used to say that to people all the time. I don't know how I'm going to get there. And then when this job came out at Hoasley Bay, I thought, well, that's a foot in the door, isn't it? It's an opportunity to see what the prison service is about, see if that's something I'm even interested in. At this point, I was battling with, am I even going to be, do I want to go and be a psychologist? And I was thinking about going down the sort of psychology route within prisons because I had that degree. So I wasn't sure what to expect. But I had been working there for 2.5 years, and the graduate scheme that I applied for was actually an external graduate scheme. So it was open to everybody, a bit similar to the Future Prison Leaders Program. And I was one of 12 that was selected to be on that, and it was yeah, I'll never forget the fact that I was one of 12, and so I still am grateful for that opportunity, even to this day that you know, there's so many I think there was over 2,000 applicants, and all the different processes you go through, and you think, "Oh, there might be someone better than me," but actually I was selected to be on there. So, my experience joining the leadership scheme, I was still young, so I think I must have been 23 at the time because I joined the prison service when I was 21. And it was it was really daunting, I guess, because I'd worked in an open prison. So HMP Hoasley Bay is an open prison. So although I had prison experience, it wasn't in a closed prison. There are no walls around you. And the prisoners have got to that point because they've progressed through their sentence. And so they're almost at the end of their sentence. So it's very different. And I think that lots of people were saying to me before I went onto the scheme, oh, you know, you're going to be going working in a closed prison and all that kind of stuff. So I was a bit nervous about it, about that transition, but actually it's an opportunity that I think like I said, I'm really grateful for, and it gave me exposure to things that I wouldn't normally be exposed to. It gave me the tools that I needed to kind of continue on in my career. Um and it was if you're a quick learner, if you pick things up quite quickly, it's definitely something that you would be able to do.
Yeah, brilliant. So you've sort of touched on it there, but are you able to tell us a bit more about how the scheme prepared you for the roles that you've taken on since?
Yeah, I think so. When you're on the scheme, you're with a cohort of individuals and you support each other through that journey as well. So I still stay in contact with a lot of the people that I was on the scheme with, and we're all at pretty similar journeys right now, actually. So, the scheme gave us the tools and I guess, the opportunity to progress through the ranks a bit quicker than what you would usually. So when you join as a prison officer, you obviously have a period of time on your probation. So I was only actually a prison officer for, I think it was between 9 months and 12 months. So it was a shorter period compared to people's careers if they haven't been on a scheme. So it gave me the opportunities to move on and progress and try out different roles. And one of the things that I think it really supported me with is trying different roles. I think when people typically join an organization, they'll stay within a role for a long time and will kind of become experts at that role. Whereas this gave you an opportunity to try different things. So I feel like now I've had so much experience, even in the 11 years I've been in the prison service, that really I've just been exposed to so much and been able to do different things that I feel like I'm a bit of a bit of jack of all trades and I've experienced different head of function roles. I've overseen, different departments and stuff like that. So it really gave me those opportunities.
Yeah, fantastic. That's brilliant. So you now oversee drug and alcohol recovery across the prison estate. So what does that entail?
Yeah, so the work that I oversee now, so I now work in headquarters. I'm now non-operational. So there's terminology operational, which is when you work directly in prisons. So I've stepped away from that and I'm now overseeing recovery across the prison. So my role specifically, I oversee the rollout of incentivized substance free living units and drug recovery rings, which in essence are units which are in prisons which support people with addiction or substance dependency and supports them in recovery. So I actually started when I was a prison officer on my scheme. I actually worked on a unit quite similar to this, and it was my first time being around people who struggle with addiction needs. And I think that I learned a lot from that experience and working with people in that environment and understanding more about different types of drugs and things like methadone and things like that. It's There's lots that I learned during that process. And then I didn't really do much around drugs for most of the leadership scheme. But once I had finished my leadership scheme and I was now a substantive head of function, so I was overseeing the whole function, there was an opportunity for me to oversee drug strategy within a prison. So at the time, there hadn't been any drug strategy head of function roles within that prison. So it was very much a new role. So it was mine. It was an opportunity for me to create that role and allowed me to take it forward. The prison hadn't been used to having someone oversee this. So it was a brilliant opportunity. And I really learned at that point how important drug strategy is within prisons. So if you think about how much it impacts on violence in prisons and safety and self harm and those kinds of things, it really impacts. So, if you can support people in recovery, then actually you support prisons to be a safer, more decent environment. So, it's just seeing that bigger picture stuff. So, my plan is very much to go back into a prison. So, I am going to be taking my deputy governor exam. And I guess longer ambitions are for me to be a governor of my own prison. That has always been a bit of an ambition of mine. And yeah, I guess that's what I want to do next and see how it is in terms of running, you know, supporting your own prison from a governor perspective. So we get to see in my role now, I oversee drug strategy leads across all prisons. So there's although I don't directly line manage those people, I kind of am a bit responsible for I am responsible for overseeing over 120 of these people who are working in these roles and support them to do the very best that they can do within their prison. So, although I'm in headquarters and have stepped away from working in a prison, I very much, me and my team support the delivery in prisons, and everything we do is to support prisons to be safer, to be more rehabilitative. So, yeah, that is what I do now.
Yeah, wonderful. So the role of governor, what would that then entail?
You basically are in charge of the whole prison. That is what we do. So you've got governors, deputy governors, and then you've got head of functions who sort of oversee all the different functions, and that kind of makes up a senior management team within a prison. So you are responsible for day-to-day decision making, finance, escalating concerns. So say for instance you need to escalate concerns, that's also your role, is to escalate up, support the staff, set the vision and the direction for your prison, and really just, yeah, be the strategic direction to drive the prison forward and, support reform.
Yeah, so there's good career paths and options there. Sounds like there's a variety of different paths that people can take once they're within the system.
Yeah, there are so many different options, and I think that is the beauty of the prison service. It's a job for life if that's what you want it to be, and
Mhm.
I very much don't see myself ever leaving the prison service. This is what I want to do, and this is where I see my career. And yeah, that's kind of it. Once you're here, there's so many different opportunities available, whether you want to go down the non-operational route or you want to continue in the operational capacity. And yeah, you've govern your own prison. It's really your career is where you want to take it.
Yeah, wonderful. And you mentioned the exam that you would need to take to step into the governor role. Is that something that is done internally, or again, is it externally through a university system? How does the different exam processes work?
So they do change over time. So it could change in future years. It's an internal exam, and the idea is it's testing your behaviors and your skills to be able to be an effective deputy governor. And once you pass that exam, then it's up to you to apply for a role.
Brilliant. So, are there any myths about working in prisons that you would like to debunk?
I think I think for me, as a young woman, a young female coming into work in the prison service, I've only worked in male prisons. So I think that quite often I get people go, "Oh, wow, you work in a man's prison. Can you do that? You're a woman."
Mm.
It's like, actually, there are a lot of women working in prisons, and you could be a man and work in a women's prison. So your gender doesn't define what category of prison you go and work in. Actually, everyone brings something different to the table. I can think of, for me being young and joining the prison service, I had a really different, life experience to some of the older generation who were in the prison and been working there for a very long time. And I can think of um, some specific examples where being young has actually been really beneficial for me, particularly working in one of the prisons that I worked in, where we had a lot of young prisoners between the ages of 18 to 21. And because I was young, I was able to build a different kind of rapport. And I actually set up a youth council within one of the prisons that I worked in, focused on giving young people a voice. That was a massive win for me.
Mm.
And managed to get real good buy-in. And it felt like they had a voice and they were able to put suggestions forward. You can be really innovative, although it's a hierarchical and there's processes in prison. You know, being innovative and coming up with new ideas, and that's something that you can do even in the prison service. So, and there's also, I think that there's a big perception around prisons. When you watch TV or you watch TV series, I get lots of questions. Oh, is it like it is on TV? And, to a degree, there are some aspects of it which are, there are similarities. But actually, most of the time, the job is just talking to people, building relationships with people, that whether that be with staff or with prisoners, everyone is a person and everyone's human at the end of the day. And if you treat people with respect, they will treat you with respect. So I think there's definitely a perception that, you'll walk into a prison and there's just going to be violence everywhere, or you might get, involved in stuff like that. But actually, although I've been involved in stuff and I've had some tough, challenging situations whilst working in the prison service, so most days are just doing your job, and you're not always exposed to stuff like that. So I think there's definitely a perception from that sense. And also, I would like to say as well that it was working in the prisons. I remember when I sort of walking onto a wing and how it kind of sounded, the smells, what you saw. I think when you see those big walls, you have no idea what is going to be behind those walls. And I think you just be pleasantly surprised at what is actually behind there, because what you've got is a community, you've got your colleagues who become your family. You're working with them every day. Some people take you under their wing. And yeah, really, it's just I love it. I absolutely love this job. And I loved every rank that I did. So on the graduate scheme that I was on, I was a prison officer, and then I went up to a supervising officer and a custodial manager, and then I went on to a head of function. And every rank that I did, I remember loving it so much and thinking to myself, "Oh, shall I just stay at this? Shall I just stay at this rank now? Because I love this rank." But actually, I thought, no, okay, I'm gonna keep going with this scheme. I want to see what the next opportunity brings. And actually, every time I then moved on, I just thought, no, this is the right path, and it just felt completely right, really. I remember, yeah, working on the wing when there were people with substance dependency, and I was an officer at the time, and there was a man who he was in active addiction and he looked quite, gaunt and stuff like that. And I saw him probably maybe 10 years later, in the capacity that I'm working in within the drug and alcohol group. I saw him in another prison on a recovery wing, and he just looked really healthy. He looked really well. And when you just think, you know, you've this is the reason we do what we do, is because we get to help people and actually make a difference, but also not just make a difference to prisoners' lives, but staff as well. And that's what doing a leadership scheme is like as well. You are overseeing staff and you can change someone's whole career, really just by giving them the right support and mentorship. So there's loads of rewarding things, whether it be with staff, prisoners. Um, yeah,
Fantastic. And finally, what advice would you give to graduates thinking about joining the prison service?
I would say if it's something that you've always been interested in, if you've been interested in, think in prisons or thinking about, the police and all those kinds of things, a lot of people don't really know what goes on behind the walls. And I think it's very easy to look at, TV programs and things like that and to get a perception of what goes on in the prison, but really you have to go in and see it and feel it. And I would I would say to anybody that it's a fantastic career. It's just what you want, and especially being a graduate, I think that I just think about my time when I was on the scheme. When you come in on a graduate scheme, there can be kind of stigmas attached to it, I guess, because you've had people that have been working there for years and years and worked their way through the ranks, and there's a perception of graduate schemes in general. But I think that once you break down those barriers and you start to see that, and they start to see you for being you, those kinds of things kind of disappear. I found that when I started, there was a stigma attached, and I had to sort of push through some of that stuff. And now no one would even know that I was on a scheme. And yeah, I think that one of the best pieces of advice I would give as well is, if you do something like this, like a Future Leaders, Prison Leaders Program, is I always looked at the role I was going to be doing next. So you have a clear plan within a scheme like this. So I knew I was going to be a supervising officer. I knew I was going to be a custodial manager. So I would always, whatever role I was in, I would look above and see how they were interacting. How would they deal with incidents? And I was always learning from what they were doing. And that then gives you that experience as well. So whatever role you're in, look at those above you and sort of try and pick up some bits from them. There might be things you don't want to take forward. There might be things you think, "Oh, I'd never do that." But that's also learning. It's going to be tough and there will be challenges, but the rewards far outweigh those. So I would encourage anybody to think about it, to go for a scheme like this. It gives you opportunities that can excel your career.
If people wanted to look further into this scheme, where can people go to find more information?
So the application windows actually open from today and closes on the 3rd of June. So if there's something you're interested in, then Google Future Prison Leaders Program, HMPPS or MOJ, and you'll be able to find the information on there.
Fantastic. We'll also pop a link in the show notes below, so give that a click. Otherwise, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Katie for their time. For more information on the scheme, you can check the show notes below. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to give us a review on Apple or Spotify. Thank you, as always, for listening, and good luck on your journey to future you.